So the three things in Buddhism, what they call listening, contemplation, and meditation. Listening is the study component of it. What we study is so that we have the actual coherent subjects that we know very well by studying and listening and reading. I suppose the reading and self-study is included to complement the listening. The listening itself is based on someone else's previous reading and his or her contemplation on the meanings of what they studied, and therefore probably some also experience they have on the listening and contemplation they did. So therefore listening is considered to be utmost important, and if that is followed by our contemplation, our own reasoning, and not just accepting on the face value where they're presented to us, however impressively for the sake of the presentation, but if some things are, you can receive them well at the time, but it's got nothing much in it, So the presentation that is not lost in a form of entertainment. Buddhism is, of course, is entertaining the highest level, I suppose. Entertaining on the highest level, not just temporarily for the on a physical, worldly level. So the listening from somebody is of great merit. And the subject that you're listening is, of course, have to be authentic sutras and shastras. Sutra means the discourses of the Buddha. Shastra is the commentary literature. So in this case, we are listening to Nagarjuna's writing, who is a very celebrated master, not only in his time, but probably nobody matched him ever since then. So he's a really matchless author and promulgator of the teachings, who is none other than prophesied and endorsed by Buddha himself, that after 400 years of the Buddha's passing away, he will come. So Buddha himself predicts. So this is one of his collection of works called Collection of Knowledge, a collection of aphorisms. So there's a lot of different writings by Nagarjuna. Some are very, very highly philosophical texts, but these are not entirely complicated philosophical texts, but the Precious Garland. So subject we are listening to is a Shastra, and that is undisputedly revered as a text. A text that is written, you can see in 12th and the 2nd century, and now we are 21st century, and almost like 1900 years. And I bet Harry Potter wouldn't last that long. They get read this, and then maybe after a few decades, nobody reads it. But Nagarjuna's writings are mainly thoughts and the teachings of the Buddha. He promulgated, he explained and clarified many things that are hidden, and like in a heavily coded text in the sutras were explained in writings such as this. And so when we listen to the teachings, and when we then our thoughts or our contemplating, when we think about them, what we heard, will register some sort of spark some stars, I suppose, in our mind. Oh, I should be thinking of this, and so this will slowly inform us and reform us. When our thought changes, our attitude changes, and it just educates us, and we become a little bit more knowledgeable, because we now have knowledge which empowers us to be in a way, or view in a particular point of view, or respond in a way we previously knew not how to. And then it has in many ways boosted us by the power of contemplation. That's why people keep reading and listening to the teachings, because each time they hear or they contemplate, it augments what they have themselves previously learned and still continue to learn. So things get refined, sharpened through the contemplation. And then this body of knowledge through study and contemplation will will enforce us to meditate. The third one is meditation. We have to realize this, not just believe them because it's written by Nagarjuna or someone is promoting Nagarjuna. We think it's an undisputable thing, but we actually haven't really done much work with it. So it has to reform us. Our meditation part of the meditation, thinking on this, will therefore make us realize the teachings ourselves. So the teachings aren't just beliefs, not just culture components that we are doing because people do that. We also just imitate them type of thing. But we actually do them for the reason that we have matured. So the meditation-derived wisdom is the highest form of wisdom, because they are experiential, not just beliefs, not just set of dogmas that we can quote and believe in them. That's, I think, less and less, more and more people turning away from beliefs. They want to contest and test and validate through experience. Validation through experience. Buddhist teachings very much emphasize the importance not merely believing because they are written in the sutras. Even in the sutras, they may be sounded good at some time, but sometimes not relevant. And you are quite allowed to contest that, quite allowed to disagree with that. And if you can find something more forthcoming in an alternate way of looking at it for your own growth. Certain sutric teachings are very literally saying, oh, do this, that, or very, very taught in a particular time and culture framework, and which is not relevant, isn't it? There are a lot of that in the Buddhist texts. Some are orthodox; they think that's the only way to do it, but they will not really meet and greet the world that actually is hungry for knowledge, because they're stuck in the way they interpret that, and therefore it's very biased against particular group of people, or whether they're gender-wise or culture-wise or even caste-wise. If Buddhism gets like archaeological samples try to keep where they are always used to be, it probably will die very soon without cultivating. So that's why writings of Nagarjunas are very, very helpful to enterprise our own spiritual way of looking things. And that actually is useful for our own everyday to-day solving sufferings and learning to remedy them by the medicine of listening, contemplating, and then meditating. So that being the case, we are here to continue where we left. I think if my memory is correct, we finish up to verse number 350, because this text has 500 verses, 5 chapters. Each chapter got 100 verses. So we will be able to complete this text with this term. The subject that we've been talking is, 4th chapter is mainly the royal policy, because this text was written to a particular person by the name of King Gautamiputra, who is a friend of the Nagarjuna, and who had the task of being the king and ruler of the land. And Nagarjuna has been spoon-feeding the king how to integrate and use his policy, being in a very powerful position, how to bring dharmically into people's lives. So this particular chapter, now we are towards the end of this chapter, is moved towards how to explain that the ordinary pleasures that we usually seek sensorily are actually lack in the objects, lack in the sense themselves. So it's in many ways try to unpack the so-called clinging and craving for pleasure based on those things. So verse number 351 is refuting the real pleasure. Real pleasure doesn't mean there is no pleasure, but there is no truly existing pleasure, particularly in the objects. And particularly then it goes to the actually 5 senses. For instance, it reads, when all 5 senses That is our sense organs and sense consciousness together, because there is no sense organ that is sensible if there is no consciousness. So when all 5 senses, these are 5 physical senses, excluding the mental consciousness, when all 5 senses, senses also used to be called sense powers. If the senses are powered by reasoning, then it's sense power. So that's a much better power. But ordinary sense power of the eye organ is being able to see a visual object. If there's no consciousness, mere round eyes cannot see objects. So the eye consciousness has to be working eye. So the eye consciousness, for instance, when it says eye and so forth, simultaneously apprehend the object, like you're seeing the cup or a glass or a box or a flower, whatever we apprehend. It looks like there is a truly existing flower as soon as the eye looks at the object. A thought of pleasure, by seeing or tasting or whatever, does not refer to all of them, So because when one sees a blue cup, I like blue cup or something. As the color of the cup, makes you pleasurable. You're very happy with blue cup, But we do not realize it's merely not merely seeing the blueness of the cup or cup of the cupness is not the real pleasure. Therefore, at that time they do not give pleasure. They do not actually give pleasure at that time if you have prior attachment to blue cup. I like blue cup. All the other cups, not pleasurable. So the actual function of the cup, the red will do, the white will do, the green will do. But the person so the pleasure is not coming from the actual visual cup, but from his or her attachment to the object, So that's what it's talking about. They do not give pleasure as it appears that as soon as the blue cup comes, we feel happy. So what it does is that it doesn't mean, of course, we shouldn't have preferences. But if you did get a really completely different cup, but you should think the very function of the cup is merely to be a container or serving something, but so therefore one shouldn't get attached to the sensorial qualities of the object in itself independently. That's what it's saying. What does it mean is because we do not know that, we usually are attached to the object per se. So when we don't get that, we get crook, for instance. So we're not happy to drink any cups, You're like a little child crying because he didn't get his favorite cup. There's a lot of child like that, isn't it? Crook because he didn't get that particular thing, So what it means is the object is empty of the cause of pleasure from its own side. It's one's attachment, illusory attachment in it from prior to it. Therefore, one has sensorily, not just sense object-wise, sensorily attached higher value to the blueness. And because of that, there is no actual ability for the object to give pleasure, but we think it does without realizing how our mind has attachment to the blue or red or round or whatever, tall or whatever the particular thing is. So this is mainly, refuting doesn't mean that it has got no value, okay? It means it is not independent cause of pleasure. We were reading just in Heart Sutra, there is no form, It says form is emptiness. So the blueness of the cup is actually emptiness of the pleasure. If the blue cup is inherent cause of happiness, then everybody will be happy with blue cups. There will be never a time the blue cup will, not be cause of happiness to others because it's inherent cause of happiness. That's not the case. So therefore, when you do that, we will see the emptiness of the form. So this is slowly the Nagarjuna is helping the King Gautamiputra like us, to not get upset by things if you didn't get that, or not get too attached to things that as your cause of pleasure is the blue cup, because there is no real independent entity in the blue cup that is the cause of pleasure. So this is refuting the proof of real physical cause of the pleasure of the blue cup. It's just a mental kind of attachment. So therefore making us to look at what is the cause of the pleasure and displeasure. Is attachment to the blue. When we get the blue, then we are happy temporarily. We think it's the blue making us happy. It's our attachment makes us feel a little bit puffed up. If we detach to it, we can draw relative function of the cup from any cup. Next one is whenever any of the 5 objects is known, because if your mind actually knows what these 5 objects are, form, sound, smell, taste, touch, because these are individual sense domains of the sense organs, as pleasurable. If you see each of the sense objects are pleasurable by one of the 5 senses. So the blue is only pleasurable to the eyed person. Blue is not pleasurable if the person is blind. So blue is not pleasurable to a big-eared person. Oh, where's the blue cup? Touch the ear. So it's not pleasurable to the ears. Not pleasurable. To the properly lips, it doesn't make any difference. To the taste, it doesn't make any difference. So it's only relevant to the eye, for the eyed person, for the person with the visual consciousness. For the blue might have a special domain of pleasure, but it is not for then the remaining objects are not so known by the remaining senses. Yeah, why aren't we enjoying the noise of the heater? We like the warmth, but we don't like the noise. So therefore we said, can we buy a quiet heater? We like the warmth it gives, but we don't want a noise. You see what I mean? So why isn't the hearing of the noise, warmth, not pleasurable? Yeah, of course. Because because you can buy a quieter heater, then you go for it. But if there was no choice, we will put up with the noisy, all those big typewriters. We used to type those huge typewriters that basically take over the whole desk. Nowadays, there's not even a single button. It's just, pressing on emptiness. Everywhere is nothing, but everywhere is something also. Isn't it? Particularly if you do multilingual face. Amazing. You can press one, no romanization. It's all Tibetan, all in Sanskrit. You can type them. Yeah? Because the actual keypad is actually not really truly as it appears. It's used B to your eyes, but for me it's not B, it's something else. I don't press it as B because I'm not pressing for B, because I have switched it to type Tibetan font. So therefore, what you see may be pleasurable, but it's not pleasurable to the rest of the other senses. So that shows it's not sort of lack of pleasure, but lack of inherent pleasure in the object itself. What does this mean is, why we have to know this reasoning is, this empower us not to get upset if we didn't get something. And we're quite happy to accept alternative. Why? We know it's not the object, it's our attachment that links with it. I want my own toy, or my own car, or my own this, my own seat type of attachment. People usually don't realize that they're not sensible. Their senses are not powered. They are insensible. Their senses are disempowered by their wrong view, thinking the object is independently what I want type of thing, So this empowers us, for instance, whatever you see or know of something, if you're not happy you, instead of thinking it's the object that is making you unhappy, it's my deluded mind making me think like this. See, we can quickly then meditate on the emptiness of the displeasure from the things. There is no sorrow. It says in the heart, so there's no sorrow. Why you have to remedy what doesn't exist? It's much better, isn't it? If there's no sorrow, it's much better. You can't remove non-sorrow. If you have the power to think it's not a cause of sorrow, you don't create sorrows. All the sorrows are created by the wrong view thinking. It's this object that is the cause of the pleasure. I'll be only happy if I get that, or I'm not happy because I get that. So your mind is very, very flexible if you sense powered. Since they then are not meaningful causes of pleasure, yeah. If you think only the blue cup is the cause of happiness, all the red, blue, all the other cups are not. So what distinguish the blue cup, for instance? Because they're equally of the maybe same weight, it's just a little layer of paint. So all the others do not have any property to give some kind of satisfaction. Is that the case? So this means that everything are equally. Everything are equal as far as their form, as far as their emptiness. When you know it's emptiness, then you wouldn't be mourning and groaning saying, I didn't get that. Lots of people are upset and hurt is because they're still angry they didn't get that. He didn't do this to me, and then if he did that, we'd be happy ever since. It's not like that even. Even the effect of he did the right thing, but the effect doesn't last long either. Then you want something else. He's like a child, like a really difficult child. So easily upset, easily liking one toy and then throwing that and then another one. All this misery is caused by clinging to object as truly existing, not as emptiness. Form is emptiness. Of course, you don't tell the beginners that, You say, oh, this is your favorite toy. Come on, you can have it. Oh, thank you. Because first you give them as really, truly existing form, don't you? And then once they're starting to develop attachment to it, we tell them that there is no truly existing form. And like that. So, the mind apprehends an image of past object which has been apprehended by the senses, like the talking of blue. It is not really drawing pleasure from the cup, this present cup, but from his past attachment to the blue cup or particular cup, and imagines and fancies it to be pleasurable. So he imagines that blue cup will make him happy. And because of that, he can't see the pleasure, the temporal function of the other cups because of that. And often people are miserable when they lose something. They think they can get something, but they're attached to that. Because of their past attachment to the past illusory pleasure as truly existing, they can't accept impermanence or lack of existence of it now. They think they lost something. It never was it in the first place. Poor thing, we didn't tell him. Oh gosh, we forgot to tell him that. but we are not informed, We didn't realize. People go on the podium, they get a little trophy or something, and they get really, really happy, For a couple of days, they're really happy, the little trophy. After a while, they look at it, gosh, I'm happy with this? On that occasion, maybe it was, but after that, it's just like another one that goes in the bin. But we are attached to it, they call sentimental value. Sentimental value is a nice term, isn't it? It actually means cause of misery, really. Sentimental value. It still means cause of misery. When one is attached to it, one can't let it go. So it imagines and fancies. It imagines to be pleasurable. Otherwise, it got nothing unique in it that truly is more pleasurable than anything else. what does it mean is when we are informed by these teachings, it'll make us to say, I'm just imagining that this is the ideal mother, or this is the ideal husband, or this is the ideal job, but actually it's not really. You know, everything has its days, and after that it's no more. You know, it's how long is your food fresh in your kitchen? You know, it's only for a little while it's good. After that it's no longer that. You know, so so that's refuting the realness of the pleasurableness of the object from its own side, yeah. Then second part is refuting the individual objects as proof of real physical pleasure. So like the blue for the people who prefer blue, that actually the individual object themselves is refuted. Also, one sense which here in the world is said to know one object. So whatever our senses apprehends, whether it's form or sound or particular music or particular incense or lack of incense. Some people don't want incense, full stop. They want to switch off the incense. Others made it deliberately for many, many months to make it. And then someone deliberately believe that this is going to be nice. All of a sudden somebody is just have a special reaction. Special reaction, yeah. Is meaningless without an object, yeah. Is meaningless without an object, and the object also is meaningless without it. So this is talking about sense organ and sense object, how they are mutually inclusive. So the sense object and sense organ both has to be mutually inclusive. If the one who likes a particular incense, okay, and he has to be there when that incense burned, you know. The other one who like the other kind of incense is not there. So you can't burn two incense in the same space and suit everybody's aroma. So that shows, you know, there is no truly existing object from its own side or truly existing subjective sense from its own side unless both are mutually inclusive. Unless both are there, there is no particular value in itself. Without an object, there is, you can't have an eye and then it expect to find the object. Because it's to try to fancy the blue, even the blue is not there, you know. Because this blue is not there, he couldn't be pleased because he's fancying blue, and all the others are emptiness. But all the others are emptiness, but what he likes is real, which is not there. What he wants is empty. What he doesn't want is full of them. Even what he wants gets it, completely changes, and it transpires within their naked eyes. And then they mourn and groan when they attach to objects. So this means one will be liberated by knowing this. Particularly people suffering from, like say, old age. They're suffering old age, not because old age is cause of suffering, but they're attached to the youth. And if they're not attached to youth, then they don't suffer. They might have certain physical symptoms, a little difficulties, but they don't nearly suffer mentally much if they're not attached to the youth. Same with positions or possessions. So actually, I want to be liberated without them. But what one sees, one can't see nothing in them. What one doesn't have, one sees everything in it. When one doesn't know the mutual inclusivity of it. Mutual inclusive means intersectable. You have to intersect the eye and object, ear and sound, and therefore none of the two are independently anything without each other. So when you know that, so this is only talking about the two, the sense organ and sense object, you know. We're not talking about the actual consciousness. But that with each the consciousness that distinguishes the difference in what we see in an object in relation to the sense itself. So object is meaningless if you don't fancy it. Yeah? So when you fancy it, even somebody's don't like it, you like it, you know. They got trash and treasures. Some people are bringing the treasures, and some people are looking for treasure, they find them. They find not in the treasure, they find in the treasures. Trash and treasures. Well, it's amazing. It says it all, really. Form and emptiness. Emptiness and form. They don't say treasure and treasure. Because, yeah, amazing. So, okay, now it goes to refuting proofs of real physical pleasure. So just as a child is said to be born in dependence upon a father and mother, meaning you can never produce a child without having both, so a visual consciousness is said to arise in dependence on eye, sense, and on form. So that shows that they're mutually dependent on it. The beauty in the object, that's what beauty is, eye of the beholder, they call it, you know. If there is a beauty is in the eye and the beholder, he doesn't have to see anything. But he says there is a beholding. So is the object, the object he has to behold, you know. And if there's no object, of course there is no not in the eye, you know. So that shows the codependency. This is important to know that everything is dependent. Why it has to be stress is because people think it's independently the object itself or themselves. It's this idea of independent, the illusory word. People want to be independent, they say. Oh, I want to be independent. Independent, relatively independent from something, but you still have to depend on other things, isn't it? You know, maybe you're independent from your mom because you no longer need her with you always, but you're still dependent on other things. You're now with a friend. You're independent, but you're not you're not floating in the air. You still need air to float in. You're independent from the mother, but you're still going with friends. You know, looks like they're independent. No, they're dependent on friends. That's the problem. Because they're so dependent on these negative friends, they are independent of the mother. She says, I don't need you. Yeah, why? She's dependent on these friends. That's the problem. She's so influenced by them, they don't want to listen to the mother or the father or the sister or somebody because they're too dependent on other things. They think they want to be independent so that they can depend on other things. So that shows that everything is mutually codependent. Being able to know this, really help us to detach from suffering and the cause of sufferings. And the cause of suffering is not the lack of a blue cup. Cause of suffering is one's attachment to it. So if one just let go and get the blue red cup instead, oh, this is a beautiful cup, and then it will make up for you because emptiness is form. Remember, before red cup was empty. It wasn't much use. All of a sudden, it became functional. And if you are able to do that, we can allay lots of our daily sufferings. It's quickly being able to not drop that wrong view that alone I want. I want you to do this to me. I wanted you to speak like that to me. But if they spoke like that, then they still will be asking for something else. They don't realize it's their own minds fancying these particular things. That is the cause of the misery, or whatever the case might be. Okay. So these two points have so far looked at the refuting the object from its own side, refuting the subject on its own side, and need to be codependent to each other. Now the next point is refuting inherently existing object. Past and future objects and senses are meaningless. So this now things like the blue cup as an object is a past object and the future objects. So the past and future objects are, and the senses are meaningless, meaning they don't have really any entity that truly exists. So too are present object. Even the present object is meaningless. Meaningless meaning do not have true inherently existing things, since they are not distinct from the past too, the other two, because if you're fancying the past thoughts or fancying the wanting that to be in the future, if you want a blue cup next time also, then this present object is also is do not have any inherently existing to make us happy, because there's also a form. Remember, all forms are emptiness, empty of inherent existence. It's not empty of existence, but empty of inherent existence. So inherent existence means that it is independent, not independently existing. It is dependent existing. So even the past, present, and future are only in relative to past. So the present, then we can talk past or of the future. But even the past cannot be talked about without past of what? Yeah? With a future of when? And so on. If you say, what's the time? You say, past 5, past 5, past 5. You say, past 5 what? You can't say past 5, past 5. You have to tell the past 3 past 5, and then it says the 3. That is, then only you can know what is the past. So this means that that even from the point of view of time, because people are usually suffering because they are in the past, they're not able to see the emptiness of the past. Therefore, they make present emptiness. Past full of the past. Present become taken up by the past. Present become empty. So, but if one sees the emptiness of the past, then one will also see the emptiness of present. Because it's only relation to the past, this is present, isn't it? But when people are miserable, they're actually suffering past. They are holding the past as a truly existing thing, even though there is none of the characters that made the past events. There's not even a half a component of the role players of that event is present, but one is able to fancy and prop them all up in one's mind. So, because past do not truly exist unless it is in relation to the present, only in relative truth. That's called relative truth. Relative truth is also called deceptive truth. To the deceptive and truth, this two means deceptive and truth. To the exalted being like arhats, the truth is emptiness. To the ordinary people, the truth is which is deceived by their own perceptions. Truth is deceived by their own perception. They themselves has been conceited in a way, not being able to see the truth. So the deceptive truth, it deceives the ordinary people as the truth. The deceptive truth. As the past, what happened in the past. Like trauma is a deceptive truth of past making present. They are suffering not past so much, but making the past present, and then therefore not having any openness in the present, because of the what looks like a realness of the past in this present state of mind. So one doesn't see the emptiness of the past, and one couldn't know how to empty the past, or see the emptiness of the inherent existence of the past. If one correspond the past to the present and the future, then one will see how one makes the other possible to exist. It doesn't exist from itself. Now, so it says here, just as due to optical error, meaning error in the eye, perceives a whirling firebrand as a wheel. If somebody is holding a small incense stick and they just do this very fast, and you will see as a ring of fire. So the senses apprehend present object as if real. So or past object, whatever it is, if the person cannot. They see the things as real, what they happen to them, what they can see them as true, because this is a deceptive truth. This deceives, because the speed of the hand moving so fast, it creates the firebrand like a ring, but actually there is no ring of fire at all. At least from this point of view. But even the darkness, if somebody's doing that, you might see there's a ring of fire. So therefore, our senses apprehend things as real, someone as aggressive, as truly themselves that are aggressive. We think that, But if that's a deceptive truth. Deceptive means ordinary people get deceived by it as the truth. They say it's your abuse, it's your aggression that made him suffer. The society does that. Always try to convict as one as truly existing cause of the suffering. It's so, and one could. It's always pushing everybody towards that direction, not knowing how that is the very fundamental cause of the suffering. And it doesn't solve the problem; it only exacerbates the problem. So when one is able to see the firebrand, you can see it deceives people thinking it's like a ring. I can see it too, but actually it's a very opposite of it. So you can see the ring, but it's not a ring. Then, of course, you're not saying, "Oh, it's not a ring, go away." You still say, "Okay, yeah, we can see a ring, but we don't see it as a ring. It's just an optical illusion." So when we have a lot of optical illusion, at least when you're looking, but what if you don't have to look? We still have mental illusion. The mental illusion is much harder to remedy than optical illusion, isn't it? It's the optical illusion only is a visual problem, but mental illusion is a mental problem. Most people's problem is not sensorial, it's mental. So when they mentally believe that we have been victim of his abuse or her aggression or their whatever it is, when we believe in that, it looks like truly existing, that we feel is inherently wrong. We will see the inherently wrong or harm. If it helps us to remedy suffering, we can adopt that view, but it doesn't. The senses and their objects are regarded as being composed of the elements. So there are more factors in each of them than something in themselves that is truly existing. Since the elements are themselves individually meaningless, individually meaningless. Individually they're meaningless, like all the sort of spice jars, full of turmeric. And you don't want to say, "Oh, this is turmeric, I love it," and you don't just gulp down, The little pinch of turmeric is good with other spices in the cooking, but itself is not really palatable. It's like a number of what we call transient collections. Themselves, by themselves is no use. Like sand in itself could not make a wall. But with the cement and with the water and with the gravel and all together, you can make a really reasonable wall. Otherwise, they themselves no. Particularly the water. Water doesn't look like wall to me. But there's a lot of water in the wall that made the cement and sand and other things, the gravel into concrete. Water is not visible. Water is not visible. So therefore one sees the elements. Since the elements are meaningless individually, they also are meaningless in fact. So that basically you see not only the form of the emptiness of things, but also the emptiness of all together also. Even they are all together, that makes it even more clear that they are all composite. They're all composites, It's like composites. They're like these days, like glasses, like the car windows, car front screens are all like that. When they design it to, when you have an accident, it just all breaks. It doesn't shatter and hurt anybody. Actually, it's like nice rain, nice rain of a little gravels on your face. It doesn't. In the old days, when they didn't have the technology, the glasses just. People got hurt more by the glass than the actual impact of it. Nowadays, the actual the screen itself just. I saw one, not because we had an accident up in Townsville. Phil was driving, big Kingswood, like Kingswood. He's driving, and he had some kind of a truck hits a little stone, before us. It hit somewhere, and the whole thing just like a unveiling a curtain or something. It didn't feel like there was no truly existing glass that was shattering everywhere, So it's like that. They are completely what looks like a huge thing became completely pulverized right before your naked eyes. And our own body, our own story is actually no different than that. It's completely made of nothing. There isn't anything truly, unitarily, independently, permanently existing self, let alone his or her story. By being able to think like that, at least we're able to develop compassion on those who don't think like that. Alas, because of lack of this eye of wisdom, they're holding them as truly existing. Transient things as real, impermanent things as a permanent, unsatisfactory things as satisfactory, and then they get really agitated from one extreme to another, and then you know why they're suffering. Then you have the moral power, authority to develop compassion, and then not get oneself sucked in by it. Because one can see how insensible most sentient beings are, and they're not able to know that. They're not able to know that. We chant the word Shakyamuni Buddha. Muni means able. It's amazing ability to see this way, see the right view, see things with the right view is the highest ability. Even being patient is not really great ability. Being patient and seeing one's patient as not truly existing is, Lots of people are patient. That's not the problem. We have a lot of patient people, a lot of generous people, but they think that what they did is truly existing by themselves alone, and then they suffer. They're clinging. Their patient is truly existing, and then they become resentful with the patience, which is actually opposite, which very defeat the very purposes, Now, if you have this maturity of hearing, contemplating, digesting, and having the dignity and comprehension to understand what Nagarjuna is talking, not just dry philosophical things, concepts and ideas, but actually practical. It empowers us to practice compassion to those. Majority of sentient beings always will behave the opposite. They will think as truly existing. They'll point all their fingers to you, and even if they 10 million finger points to you, you are not going to be you're not going to be good morning and groaning saying they all pointed their finger to me. Because it's empty of empty of inherent existence, And when beings don't see this, then they suffer. Then you have power to be compassionate and not suffer from compassion fatigue. Even your compassion is not truly existing. It is totally dependent on understanding of the other people's suffering and their causes. You don't have homegrown compassion. You don't have homemade compassion, truly existing compassion. Your compassion has to be practiced in relation to sufferings. You can't have heaps of compassion and go somewhere, prefer to go somewhere where there's no suffering. I have a bit of compassion, but I don't want to practice here. There's too much suffering here. Oh, not here either. I mean, you will never learn how to know what is compassion at all, because this compassion is untested. Compassion that actually meets and greets suffering and actually embraces that, and then see one's own compassion, even one's compassion is not truly existing. It is totally only relying on the suffering of sentient beings that we can practice compassion. Wow. And so one wouldn't preferring to avoid these sufferings. One would not try to show this aversion to sufferings. That's what Nagarjuna is talking about. Not the dry philosophical things, if we don't look at from what we call point of view, like His Holiness Dalai Lama is talking. You really have to think what he's talking about. What has it got to do with me in my particular situation that I'm not really sitting very well? How can I unpack this? How can I see the lack of inherent existence of my story, or my object, my subject, my doings and failings? Does it truly exist? Is it really me? Is it really him that made me to do this? When we're starting to do this, you can see these amazing muscles you're developing that you never had. They're called power, One of the qualities of Buddha is power. It's not the kind of power that he can borrow you. When we think in this way of thinking, it's only Buddhism is a thought, the attitude. When we start to think like that, then we are able to think that way and not become vulnerable to the sufferings, because we exactly know. And then we are very compassionate, particularly to those who are suffering and complaining, and maybe aggressive and so on. And we just have to then be calm, not to escalate their sufferings, and then tolerate. Because then our tolerance is practicable, because otherwise tolerance is not tested. Everything is unfired pot, Then all of a sudden, then you fire the pot here. Fire itself is no use unless it can fire something. Pot itself is not useful unless it's fired. Yeah. In suffering we grow, if we have compassion. If we have aversion to suffering, and if we have aversion to people who have problems, we are not practitioner, full stop. Practitioner mustn't choose people. Practitioners must choose thoughts. What attitude of mind can meet and greet and embrace this suffering and allay the suffering? Because he knows even sufferings are impermanent. Even sufferings are not truly existing. How can he be intimidated by any volumes of suffering? Nagarjunas, the purpose of showing lack of inherent existence is anything, even suffering, lack of inherent existence. They call emptiness of phenomena, emptiness of self. So emptiness of phenomena is here emptiness of suffering. The suffering that we think it's caused by this or caused by that is not true. That is just one of the small components. It's in itself, it's very meaningless. And only in relation with the other, when they talk about people making explosives, They need all this chemical, they need all this technology, knowledge, and then the gadgets and so on. Actually, it's there. It's all there. It's just matter one is deliberately going for how to make that, how to gather these ingredients, and how to create devices and maybe use the mobile or whatever these things. When people's mind is up to something, then they can improvise some things. People who wanted to harm something, what other people are designed to transport, maybe one plane coming from 200 people carrying from Jakarta to Australia or Australia to Jakarta, is for people to bring comfortably from one end to another, and someone is deliberately trying to create devices to blow that, So you can see that actual plane itself is an amazing mechanical engineering that will empower to take off, carry that much weight, and also bring very comfortably one place. But if the very technology is misused for destructive purposes, very, very easy, very, very easy. So that's why everything is interdependent. When we are able to understand that, then we have the benefit. We have the benefit of this knowledge. This knowledge is called Mother of all the Buddhas. There's the mantra of all mantras. Unsurpassable mantra. The mantra that surpasses all mantras. It doesn't mean you have to say it, It means you have to think that way. You have to think in this way, then it surpasses all other recitations. When you are thinking that, your mind is already mantraing. You're protecting your mind from the wrong conceptions. That is the highest mantra. Yeah, when you can remember these verses and then make them relevant to our situations, then you can see what we're really talking about. If the elements are each different, elements meaning the various ingredients that makes any components possible, each different, it follows that there could be fire without fuel, If mixed, they would be characterless. Such is also to be ascertained about the other elements. So this means the elements themselves do not truly exist. You can have poison, semi-poisonous drug, but when it's medical. They go medical marijuana. Medical marijuana is medical marijuana. There's no drug or marijuana. The just question is how much is used, to who, and for what purposes. If it's very, very well controlled, so there is no real poison in the poison. There's no truly existing there. So therefore there isn't anything it's only one of the ingredients. But if that ingredient does not come with these ingredients, you can have a matchbox. You can have a matchstick rather, or matchbox. But if you have a matchbox but no sticks, but if I rub this cup on the matchbox, it will never produce any fire. So something is lacking. When certain elements are lacking, nothing can be produced, For instance, the water pour into the matchbox. Try to pour fire. Pour the water on the matchbox. Very good. It's destroyed the matchbox and wasted the water, and there was no fire at all whatsoever. But if the same matchbox were put with the matchstick, it's a quite a different thing, So that shows that only when the correct causes and conditions come together, then it can produce an effect. But otherwise, it's completely devoid of any character from its own side. Because the elements are thus meaningless in both these ways, so too is composite. So too is composite means the whole thing. Whole cup itself, Not only the elements in the cup are empty of inherent, even the cup, the composite itself, lacks the cup. Cup lacks cupness from its own side, unless we label it. Isn't it? For us, it's a cup, but for a little ant, it's probably a lake full of water. if the I don't know what the ants will call a glass of water, whether it's a lake or a pond or a reservoir, maybe. For them, getting in there is not a good idea. For us to drink 750 sort of milliliters is quite okay. For them, it will drown them. For us, it's quench thirst, but for the ant, it will quench their life. So one is not to quench. The water is not the cause of quenching thirst alone. It's not inherent cause of quenching the thirst. It can also wash. If you left there for a couple of weeks, it probably will dry up. So because there's no truly existing water, remember? Because there's no truly existing water, it cannot remain there as water for longer than what is reasonably possible. So how long do you keep the problem? This whole thing is, how long is a problem? If you are firing it, if you are revisiting it, if you are validating it, then it's a problem. But otherwise, there's no problem that is really truly exists from its own side. Even the composite is empty of inherent existence. You know? Have you seen when people are moving, they're throwing so many things, other people say, oh, he's throwing that. You know? When somebody's trying to build a little house, create a home, they're trying to gather as much as possible, you know? Others who are trying to downsize the house or whatever, everything that goes into the bin. Yeah? So that's the half of the thing they have full into their cupboard all went to the bin. Why? There's nothing even in the composite that is truly exists unless we think it is. Unless we think it should be kept or they are valuable, whatever it is. Because a composite is meaningless, so too are forms meaningless in fact. Unless we put value to them, you know, unless we value to them, we don't see, unless we fancy value in some things, we don't see value in them. You know? People who have nothing but snow, they have a lot of names for different snows. They're all same, looks like same, but they have different names for different snows because they haven't got much but snow that truly seems to exist. You know, and then same goes with the wool. You have no idea how many classes of wool there are. You know, we are not far from the wool capital of the world, you know. Near Goldman, they have the biggest kind of wool classing facilities, and how much the whole science of the wool teaches you how many types of wool there are. But when you really look for details, you will see something. But when you really look for the whole thing in the very lump of it, there isn't anything, you know. So all forms, however big, like empires, big powerful companies, quickly, no trace of it. You know, no trace of it. It's just completely impermanent. You know, it used to be very important, but now completely meaningless. Yeah. Was the magnet of the whole town. Everybody went there, worked there, like 2,000 people work there. And now it's just like a ghost town. And nobody wanted to buy that land. It used to be very valuable, whatever, you know. It's like that. So therefore, do not take anything so literally as truly existing. This is what really is the message. Refuting the... and because of that, don't get attached to object as truly existing cause of pleasure. And that's what the real message of Nagarjuna is. Also because, now this he moves to the very topic, is also because consciousness, feeling, discrimination, and compositional factors all together and individually are without essentially factuality. Therefore, pleasures are not ultimately meaningful. So, because what we have read so far in the last 10 verses are all about form. All about form. Like in the Heart Sutra, it says, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Form is no other than emptiness. Emptiness is no other than form. And then he goes to, likewise, feeling, and so on. Here also he says, also, the other four aggregates, such as consciousness aggregate, feeling aggregate, consciousness meaning, like say visual consciousness or auditory consciousness and all those 6 sensory consciousness are without essential factuality. So even the consciousness itself is if you recognize somebody as your neighbor, you know, as your neighbor, because you think that he's your neighbor. But essentially that's not true. He's not neighbor to him. He's neighbor to you, but he's not neighbor to others, you know. So he's not inherently exists neighbor, you know, to everyone. So he's not independently neighbor. He's dependently neighbor to whoever is neighbor to him. Because if he's neighbor to you, you're neighbor to him. So one is neighbor, other is non-neighbor. He can say he's your neighbor. You can say he's your neighbor. See, both are identical. How boring. both are neighbors, only to each other, but not to the others. So our consciousness, oh, it's my neighbor, yeah. Oh, is he your neighbor? Oh, yeah, okay. Then you relate to him and he is a neighbor. That's right. But to the son, he's his father. To the boss, he's his worker. You know? To the people who gives, he's his gardener or whatever, you know? So who is conscious of him? What's true? What truly he is? He's got all kind of identities. From my point of view, he's a neighbor. From his son's point of view, he's a father. from his other relatives, they see differently. So what is he? You know, he can't be all of that. That's too much difficult. Like you are a mother, your mother, and a practitioner, and a nurse, and a daughter. You know, you are your mother in front of your children, your daughter in front of your mother, and so on. So, whose consciousness is correct? Whose conscious recognition of us is correct? Consciousness means recognition. Whose recognition is correct? Everybody's recognition is relatively true, but ultimately not true. When you are able to do this, you can disagree with people who disagree with you. You're completely quite comfortable with that. You don't feel offended because people have completely contrary view from yours. It doesn't hurt you. And also you wouldn't try to push your views because it's not truly existing. It's no useful unless it's received by others. Well, it's really cause of pain in your own neck. So sorry, I will withdraw my useless view. Very good. You will have humility to quickly accept your view, and you don't feel as if you've been rejected or unsupported that way. You don't think like that. See, this is what we're talking about. Lots of people are really upset after a meeting because they didn't listen to me or something like that. It's ridiculous. Whether it's themselves or it's somebody or a group of people, they usually just crook because they are so rigid that their view has to be heard too, you know. And we suffer because we are, you know, our consciousness, our discrimination is factually wrong. In essential, it's got no essential factuality, that's it. Without essential factuality, meaning it doesn't have any entity that truly exists from its own side. You know those in Fishwick there is a place where they sell clothes for very big people, you know. So if you're small people, they're not interested. If you come near the shop, if they're big people, they're really interested. Oh. Because they sell only clothes for really, really large people, you know. Can small people cannot buy clothes for big brothers? Of course they can. Oh, you want to buy from your brother? Oh, what size does he wear? Then you're very interested in him. Otherwise, you think he's too small to be a client, is it? So, this is talking about that if we draw a particular pleasure, this is talking about pleasure from feeling, from seeing, if pleasant, seeing something pleasant, hearing something pleasant, somebody says nice things to you, or like makes you feel good, or somebody says really hurtful thing. You don't get upset if you understand this. Oh, he says this, even if he says this, we're not grasping to the eye, and he's saying this about me, type of attitude. There's no suffering. Even what he says has got no suffering. It's only how vulnerable, how negative we are, how vulnerable, how predisposed we are to suffer. Mostly we have such a predisposition to suffer because we're grasping. If we're grasping, we will suffer in no time. So, therefore, anything that did make you happy, pleasure, even said something did make you happy for what they did or gave or whatever they did, but you don't get attached to them. You see, because it's not that you're not saying it is not pleasant. You're not going to complain them saying this is empty of pleasure. What are you trying to do to me? But you're not going to attach to that as truly existing one, because of its compositional nature of compoundedness. Compoundedness is many parts. Remember, many parts themselves are meaningless, and then many parts put together become composites. Composite self is not truly existing. And when you're able to do that, you can develop detachment, which is the remedy for attachment and craving. And so this next point is very important, refuting inherently existing even pain. Now this is useful. Just as lessening of pain is fancied to be pleasure, in fact, because if it is reduction of pain is called pleasure, it's a pleasure isn't some isolated thing, It's actually reduction of degree of the pain become pleasure. So distraction of pleasure is also fancy to be pain. So therefore pain that we have is what we were attached to as fancied as pleasure. And this is why a lot of yogis, they're daring to go in with elements. They just let their body be exposed to the elements, because they're trying to lessen the pain, of attachment to comfort. Yeah, they try to lessen the pain to attachment to comfort. Then they're happy in the cold or in the caves, and because they're able to daring to do what ordinary people aren't able to do. They're not dependent on cozy, comfortable things. And because of that, they're lessening the pain of caused by craving. And so the bliss that people have in wild wilderness meditation, in solitary meditation, is because they're able to lessen the pain caused by one's own naivety and ignorance. Because if the pleasure comes necessarily in isolation, as soon as everybody goes there in isolation, they will say, oh, wow, this is so good, why didn't we try this before? No. They are able to lessen the pain that they are caused by attachment by going into solitude. So their craving has been minimized. Because craving is minimized, and the real the pain doesn't exist. Pain, there was no pain to lessen. If you know how to switch off the craving. craving for company, craving for food and sleep are not there. When the practitioner mind is predisposed to the opposite, then they are actually lessening the pain of craving. And when they're able to overcome that becomes a bliss. That becomes the enlightening experience. It's not a torture. It's not a mortification, as some people think. At the beginning, it looks like self-mortification. There is no self to mortify. Until one has that, it will be really self-mortification, body mortification. The Buddhist yogis going there because he's not attached to the self. Then they don't suffer. They're not going there to suffer. They're going there to lessening the pain from attachment to craving and pleasure. It's a much more powerful, I would say, victory, true meaningful victory. Because the victory over destroying enemies, defeating them, is meaningless victory. Yeah? The victory over one's own inner afflictions and aversion and anger and all of that is actually lessening the pain of ill will. Loving kindness is lessening the pain caused by ill will. It's no loving kindness by itself. It's lessening the pain caused by ill will. Then you starting to feel the benefit of loving kindness. I don't know how much loving kindness benefit the other people, but it's supposed to be sending this radiance of love from Canberra to the rest of the world. I don't know how the rest of us. George is meditating. Oh, we feel it. Oh, yeah, everybody feel like. I don't know how many people are responding to the loving effect of our loving kindness meditation. See, loving kindness meditation is lessening the ill will in us. Lessening the ill will in us. There's no truly existing loving kindness meditation, It's unsitting the ill will. In unsitting the ill will, become goodwill. It's even therefore the whole idea of loving kindness isn't something that you can capture or collect a kind of specimen from somewhere else and then try to regenerate. It's not like that. It's actually complete mutation of ill will. Lessening here called the lessening. Here is called lessening. And if you can lessen, you can mutate it totally. You can totally mute the craving. It's good to know how to mute the craving mind or angry mind. And then, of course, the mutation of the ill will mind is goodwill. See? Then even the goodwill you cultivate is not truly existing. If you have no object to have ill will to, you can never have goodwill. So even your goodwill is completely dependent on the object, isn't it? So that's why people who, in Mahayana Buddhism particularly, if someone made a terrible mistake, we don't try to exclude ourselves from associating them. We deliberately try to have them part of us, to bury our ego by mixing with them. That we are not think that we are too pure to be mixing with them. We deliberately have to visualize our enemies in front of us, father on the right, mother on the left when we meditate. It means we have to include everybody without creating boundaries. Oh, I don't go with him because he did this or like that. It's not Dharma. Dharma practitioner has to coexist with this suffering and its causes to develop compassion and wisdom. Four truths Otherwise, why didn't the Buddha teach just the two last truths? Why bother to talk about the first two truths? There's plentiful there anyway. So why to talk about it if you don't have to coexist with suffering and its causes? So therefore, excluding from each other as one shouldn't mix together. This kind of a very, very dualistic kind of attitude is no sign of Buddhist understanding, philosophy, let alone practice. Lots of very baked Buddhists who don't understand real philosophy and impose the kind of Judeo-Christian morality on Buddhism and then think that is Buddhism. Without any wisdom, what is Buddhism so unique about? Nothing. Probably quite moral. People quite moral in their own way without needing Buddhism. The unique feature that Buddhism brings is the wisdom. If wisdom is just thrown out, and then when one utilizes to dualize, create division in the community because of people with suffering and karma, are some too bad to be mixing together type of attitude. It completely lacks any touch of understanding of this philosophy of Middle Way, let alone compassion, let alone wisdom. And that's why you can see how even His Holiness says, after 30, 40 years of thinking on emptiness, he's beginning to, he's of course saying it out of modesty and humility, But others think they know everything. Just reading a couple of books and half a dozen years of reading some things, they think they know everything, and they think this is the way to practice type of thing. Dharma has to coexist with suffering and sentient beings. That's why the late Khyentse Chökyi wife, she herself is late now, she prayed that she be born in hell realms. Because at least there is some real work to do there. She's not singing praises for heaven when she dies, Try to exclude oneself from difficult sentient beings, that's too idealistic. That's like escapism. As we can't be bothered being associated with suffering sentient beings and who have karma, what kind of bodhisattva is that? What kind of refuge is that? That's why Nagarjuna, as early as in his time, took the liberty to spell out this deeply, I would say, important philosophical, I would say, framework, so that people are starting to know the lessening of the pain is fancied to be pleasure, in fact, ordinary pleasure, So therefore, there is no truly existing pleasure that you actually gain from things. But if you are able to practice to lessen the pain due to craving, of course, it's not fancying that as a pleasure, is it? It's a fancying that as a freedom from having to crave pleasure, because there's no truly existing pleasure. Thus, attachment to meeting with pleasure and attachment to separating from pain are to be abandoned. Yeah, so aversion from suffering, one should have some kind of sympathy for suffering and those who have suffering. If as a practitioner become completely opposite, is not a practitioner. It's an idealist. Are to be abandoned because they do not inherently exist. Thereby, those who see thus are liberated. Those who can see this way, they call arhats, seers. Seers doesn't mean who can see future and read people's mind. These are not regarded as a seer in Buddhism. It's just like New Age people do that all. They don't know how many clients they're going to get tomorrow, but they think they can read people's future. So, I mean, they I don't know whether you receive some emails, from the people who think they are some kind of mediums or something. They say, "Do you know what's going to happen to you in next July?" or something. They try so hard to get you to believe in their reading, as they are medium and they know everything. You see, the real seer here says, real seer is one who's liberated to see these things. Attachment to meet with pleasure, wanting to seek pleasure, craving pleasure, is like a cause-seeking problem. And if you know the pleasures are impermanent and not attached to it, and then it's not the same thing what we're talking about. But majority aren't thinking like that, and their attachment is separate from pain. They don't want to suffer. They don't realize the merit and virtue of pain. And they want to separate from the pain as quickly as possible. They don't have any maturity to understand. These are both to be abandoned. And one who knows these to be abandoned, and knowing neither of them truly exists from their own side, and then live equanimously, it doesn't mean like a vegetable. You still understand the plight of sentient beings like oneself, but at least one is no longer tossed up in the ocean of turbulence of duality, attachment to one, aversion to another. It's not like that. One is truly, thereby those who see these are liberated. It's like a waterproof jacket. The water touches it, but it doesn't wet the body or the jacket itself. You're in samsara, but not soiled by them. People will see you in samsara, but you're not soiled by them. Like the lotus is in the mud, but it is not soiled by the mud. It actually beautifies. It looks even more beautiful in the mud. Once lotus is cut and put in the hair, it's dead in a couple of hours. So we should be where the suffering is. We should be with difficult people and still not reject them, not try to cut them off out of our righteousness, out of our impatience. That's what it's talking about. That's what Avalokiteshvara has 1,000 arms, 1,000 eyes. We can't see enough what we need to see because we're trying to close our eyes. We don't want to look at that, let alone try to attend to them. The Bodhisattva's principle, Bodhisattva's ability to vary, their ability to multitask for the benefit of sentient beings, is not because they want to break the record, what people haven't done, but it needs to be done. It says what had to be done. And then, whether by rising up or staying up late or fasting or these things, they do. Not because they are attached to food and therefore they're also fasting. They're fasting amidst those who are addicted with various things. They eat too much or drink too much. And so then they get to know, oh, really, They might be themselves beyond it. They might be beyond it. But bodhisattvas have to be with sentient beings. It's their prayer never to abandon sentient beings. It's not a prayer that may I be able to first to abandon all sentient beings who's difficult. That's not even renunciation. That's pure escapism, coward. Yet people encourage each other to do that. Oh, he's like that. Get out of him. Don't associate with them. Why don't you go somewhere? Whether it's family or whether it's job or whatever it is. As if the other side is perfect. As if you can find somebody who's perfect of all the perfect. So when one understands this, one sees things. And when one sees these things, of course, one has an amazing advantage. You have a very, very They say, you have the best location now from which to view the reality. Now you can view everything correctly. But if you have this dualistic, moralistic, judgmental kind of view, it's very, very dualistic, samsaric. It's just perpetuate the problem. And it's only increase our own anger or impatience and judgment and suffering and proves our own ineffectiveness, our own miserable practice. So when you get this view, which is the merit, which the view comes from merit from study and listening and thinking and then relating to it and try to really vary our views about things and therefore restraining our thoughts and our opinions about these things. And then you can see now we are actually taming ourselves somewhat from this and developing amazing degree of tolerance with these things, tolerance based on the difficulties of sentient beings' sufferings. What sees reality, this is now we have dealt with all the 5 aggregates from form, feelings, and so on. Now coming to the sixth consciousness, which is the mental consciousness. What sees reality, conventionally, it is said to be the mind. So even what we see things as blue or pleasant as a pleasant or whatever it is, it's only it's the mind. For without mental factors, there is no mind. So the mind itself also needs mental factors. There is no mind that is truly existing, that you can measure and that you can read a bar and there's no barcode for the mind, what it is and how tall, how long, how feminine, how masculine, how old the mind is. You can never age a mind, you can never measure a mind, you can never photograph a mind. So he says, and hence mind and mental factors are meaningless. So don't take it too seriously that you are your mind. Oh, I hate my mind. Due to which it is not asserted that they are simultaneous, So even the mind is not truly existing, remember that. This is now coming from the form all the way to all the sense organs, sense objects, and then now the mental conscious mind itself. Even the mind itself is not identifiable. Identifying the lack of inherent existence of the mind. The unfindability and unfinder of the mind, unfinder of the mind is emptiness. Unfinder of the mind is the emptiness, which then sees the emptiness of all forms, also all phenomena. Also, it didn't see anything in the forms that is form, anything in the suffering as suffering, other than the emptiness of them. You found emptiness of the inherent existence of the form, but did you nevertheless saw the form as conventionally labeled, square as square, yellow, red, and new, old. Yeah, this is deceptive truth. This is only relative. Relatively, it's there, but soon it won't be. Soon it won't be. There will be no trace of it. So therefore, it's next to emptiness. Just question is how soon it's going to be emptiness. When you don't digest emptiness, you can call it impermanence. Oh, yeah, impermanence. Oh, you can't digest that, call it change. Oh, you can change. So it's not really. All of them are just little props so that you can realize emptiness. Not that so that you can have those. So that they lead you to realize emptiness of things. Knowing thus correctly, just as it is, meaning usually we see things not as it is, but as it appears to us. Now one is able to distinguish as it appears and as it is. And because we know what it is, as it is empty of inherent existence, but it appears as this or that due to causes, conditions, and our own designations and dependent origination and so on. That transmigrating beings do not exist in fact. So what are you so worried about sentient beings? Even sentient beings do not exist inherently, let alone too many. Even let alone too many or too difficult as sentient beings. Even sentient beings do not exist. One passes from suffering, not subject to rebirth, and hence without appropriating rebirth, like a fire without its cause. So this is almost like being able to not become overwhelmed by difficult sentient beings. When you understand the emptiness of mind, of course, that's why. When you don't understand the emptiness of mind, there seem to be always independently existing difficult sentient beings. But the mind that apprehends them itself is now understood to be apprehendable as empty. So the emptiness, that apprehender of the emptiness of mind is the emptiness. And it is only with emptiness that one actually give form to form and give feeling to feeling, and because they're only props, they're just scaffoldings, they're not the real thing, so that you can understand emptiness. There's no danger we understand too quickly anyway, so it's good to have a lot of different little tools here and there. so the Dharma is amazing, very colorful. Mandalas, sadhanas, chanting, mudras, deities, masculine, feminine, wrathful, peaceful. All these things are just all amazing. The amazing compassion, infinite compassion of Buddha is trying to suit the predisposition of so varied sentient beings, mentalities, just like a supermarket. Try to please everyone, so have everybody's needs. So everything is just multifarious manifestation of Buddha's infinite compassion. But ultimately, of course, those people of sharpest faculty straight away go meditate. Heart Sutra. Who needs too much? But majority are belonging to dull faculty, dull but faculty, dull and wise faculty. Dal, the D-U-double-L. I don't think eating dal makes you dull, but yeah. So people who are dull faculty and don't even know it's dull faculty, many toys are there. Many toys are given there, to understand emptiness. Different toys to bring out the children, like sentient beings, are lost in the burning house and playing with their toys. They're so caught up in their toys as best toys in the burning house, and they don't know how to get out of it. You don't want to tell them the house is burning. You have to tell them there's a really nice toys out here, and then get them out. So all the Dharma teachings, various rituals, prayers, mantras, deities, methods are just little toys to bring the sentient beings out of the samsaric pitfall or wrong views. Like a fire without its cause, yeah. When the craving for the eye and grasping to the eye is truly existing, is not there, there's no fire. Nirvana is called nirvana. In Pali means nibbana. Nibbana means to blow out the fire, to put out the fire. Samsara is like a burning, constantly burning, excruciatingly burning. You're just try to snap the fire, to extinguish the fire. The craving of the ego is there, then the fire will be there. There is no doubt about it. When the craving is lessened by muting the craving of ego, because there's no truly existing ego, then of course naturally the complaints, the dissatisfaction, discontentment will decrease. Without telling, you don't have to tell to decrease discontentment. It naturally, they say, there's no clouds, there's no shadow. Yeah. So if there's no craving, even if you're belted, you don't suffer. You can't hit emptiness. Bodhisattvas also who have seen these. Now, this is not easy to see, this to have to witness this. You can hear about this, you can read about this, but actually, in your deep thinking, meditation and reading, and sometimes you can sit there on the bench, you're starting to think like this. It definitely can happen, You've got to be in that kind of tuned state of mind to be thinking. And who have seen this, seek perfect enlightenment with certainty. The enlightenment is the seeing. Vipassana means extraordinary seeing. Pasana means seeing. Vipassana means extraordinary seeing. It's not a form of meditation. It's a kind of it's just like culmination of it. Meditation is vipassana. Vipassana is not a 10-day thing you do. Probably during the 10-day, you probably do the really hard, calm abiding. Whether in the 10-day or in the 6 months or whatever, when you got the actual glimpses of vipassana, little twinkles of vipassana, until one realizes the emptiness of inherent existence of things, there's no vipassana. Even you call it vipassana, it's not going to come. They make the connection between lives until enlightenment only through their compassion. Yeah, so it is due to their consummate compassion. They have a commitment to keep coming to samsara because they are needed. Because this is where sentient beings are. Nobody is up there in empty heaven. Heaven have zero population. Who want to go there and try to find a job? We are needed here. The Bodhisattvas therefore pray to delay their final enlightenment and not give up on any sentient being. This is the whole thing. And not because sentient being is too easy to deal with. No matter how extreme difficulty, you never to give up on them. That is the prayer of a Bodhisattva. Because there's no shortage of such difficult sentient beings, but there's danger of the shortage of the aspiration. So Bodhisattvas, therefore, life after life, they make prayer. Just like the earth, just like the water, just like the mountain, just like the ocean, may I never disappear. That's the prayer. This is somewhere we read in the previous reading. That's what the Bodhisattva's highest prayer is, to liken themselves as elements, completely selfless. And the rocks are always there in the cold, or the ocean, the rivers, and everything we have, the trees, they're there, and we want as the furnitures, we can do the lumbering. When we want them to as a part of a beautiful nature, they're standing there tall in the cold. What are they? Always there. The Bodhisattvas have to be just like a selfless trees, a selfless nature, and then how can they count lives? Yeah, they just try to aspire, try to. It's like one lamp lights another lamp. They just wanted to make sure the next life is also lit by this life. So what couldn't they finish this life? They don't give up on. They know they can continue. And therefore there's not a really hurried urgency to get it all right in this life, and therefore being very impatient. Bodhisattvas have countless lives, for there are countless sentient beings. How can one possibly be the first one to reach the summit? That's why I said, don't be the first one to reach the summit. The reason for that is because there are a lot of lowly performers stuck down there at the foothill. And if one is not shepherding them, what's the point of being there the king on the top of a mountain? Everybody wants a king. Very few wants to be the shepherd. And so one has to continue. That every single sheep or like flock, members of the flock, are your cause of existence. Until enlightenment, only through their compassion. Yeah. And compassion caused by sufferings of others. You cannot practice compassion alone. You cannot practice compassion on its own. Compassion has to practice with suffering sentient beings. And if suffering sentient beings are usually one's own karmically connected sentient beings, you can't pick and choose sentient beings to practice compassion. You have to practice the most difficult, what is all there, nearest and dearest, the most difficult that might be. Unless they are the one who leaves you or turns their back to you, we should never turn our back to them. That has to be the bodhisattva. Only difference, if everybody is bodhisattva, that will be good. Even if it's few bodhisattva, still there's a lot of hope. But those who forget the spirit of the bodhisattva and try to clean this world of difficult people, they not even have heard refuge or not understood refuge, let alone embracing bodhicitta. The whole purpose of the bodhisattva is to heal, to nurse and be those who have fallen and falling again. And when one develops this kind of stamina and I would say merit to understand that's actually what it's really is the practice all about, then one becomes what they call the lotus, unsoiled by the soil, unsoiled by the mud, or the water. It just, and from the greatness of compassion, one doesn't leave the samsara. From the greatness of nirvana, one doesn't also stay in nirvana. and this is where makes the bodhisattvas practice together with realization of these teachings of lack of inherent existence empowers the individuals to develop the union of compassion and wisdom. So with this, we'll conclude here and dedicate the merits. Thank you for your listening and contemplation. I'm sure that contemplation will take more, even when we are not listening. But here we'll conclude it with the dedication merit on page 11. By the merit of this, may we attain the state of omniscience and defeat evil enemies of defilements. May I liberate all sentient beings from the samsara oceans and turbulent waves of birth, all this sickness and death. By listening to the excellent precious Maya and her teaching, wherever boundless merit I've acquired, may all sentient beings become precious and stainless vessel to retain the excellent and precious Maya and her teachings. May the supreme and precious bodhicitta take birth yet not done so. Where it has been born, may it increase abundantly without degeneration.